I used to tunnel in my head for hours until I looked at this one word differently. If you've been experiencing tunneling thoughts, overthinking, isolation, loneliness, because you're in that mental prison, then my friends, you're exactly where you need to be. I'm going to be sharing with you one of the ways that I have helped myself overcome that entrapment in the mental chatter and back into something more expansive. Even as of recently, I've had a lot of production work that kind of stretched on for days, and that is very much involving the mind, a lot of mind work, and it's sort of kind of spun me off balance. But another sidebar, I've gotten myself into depression a couple other times in my life because of the tunneling thoughts, because I didn't know how to properly utilize my mind, which is a tool. And that's why I always emphasize in my teachings and the tools that you have to understand your tools in order to use them properly. Because even though we have it, it's not like we were given a user's manual to this human experience. That would have been really lovely, but we have to figure it out as we go, which is how we acquire even more wisdom. But going back to, the tools, we need to understand how to use it, how the world and the universe really works in order to leverage it to get the intended results that we want, right? And so the mind is not any different. The mind is a really awesome processor. If you haven't checked out my video already, it's really wonderful. It's going to bridge a lot of the gap here and bring some clarity as to what the function of the ego is, what the function of the mind is, and the heart, so you can understand how and when to best leverage those tools to your advantage, to creating the life that you want and experiences that you want to live day after day, day in, day out. So I'm going to link that in the description box below, but be sure to check that out. Because in that video, I talk about how the mind is a processor. And what's really cool about the mind is that not only is it this amazing processor, but it also is our link with consciousness. The heart is as well, but we're going to focus it more on the mind for the sake of this tool. You can think of consciousness as light. Simply, purely, like archetypally, we can look at consciousness as light, because some things that taught me as I've traveled around the world throughout the years is that this is kind of a universal archetype. We understand that deep within our bones. We sort of accept that, yes, consciousness is light. So I'm not going to go deep on the unpacking of that in this video, but when we talk about light, this is kind of like our supercomputer, the source consciousness, where we all derive from. To put this more into terms, I'm going to just read directly from my mindfulness deck the word consciousness. This is the spiritual toolbox tool, and the word anchor that we use. I'm just going to read the description I have made for it. By the way, this is in the beta version. I'm going to be releasing my mindfulness deck pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. It's going to contain all these spiritual toolbox tools and more. So in the word consciousness, we have the word us highlighted. We are consciousness. We are interconnected through consciousness, and therefore we can never really truly be alone. So reading directly, where do I end and you begin? How do we define consciousness? It has stumped the scientific community because it is tricky to measure. Consciousness is made up of the very fabric of this universe. It is pure awareness shared by all beings, including Mother Earth. An infinite, interconnected energy exchange system, far more complex than we can even begin to understand. Have you ever heard of universal consciousness? On a non-physical scale, we are all part of this fluid cosmic soup. It is both internal and external. It is the very bridge telepathy and channeling travels through. It is source. It is spirit. It is us. So rather than trying to explain that, I thought I would just read it directly off of my card. I hope that helps you understand the nature of consciousness. And why am I drawing this out? It's because the ego is going to create separation, okay? We are the same. Literally, there's no separation between me and you from a level of a perspective of a reality. The mind is always going to course correct that and say, oh, wait, no, I'm separate from you. Because it's supposed to do that. We're supposed to be able to like luxuriate in this grand illusion that we are separate from one another. But when the ego is left unchecked, that separation that divide can get very wide. The mind also, the second player in the game that works against this idea. The mind is so amazing, but if we don't know how to properly utilize it, it can continue to draw us deeper into that separation and make that divide even wider and wider and wider to the point that it's like a canyon now. So the mind is really great, but you need to be able to like direct it. If you're not directing it, then it's going to just be an overdrive. Okay, so the mind is, think of it as like a silo. It's the very nature of it is fixated. If you give it a problem as a processor, it's going to keep tunneling on that problem and processing it, like as if you left a tab open on your computer and just walked away. It's going to keep rendering the information and looking for the sources, just continuing to process. So when that is left unchecked, it can definitely create this imprisonment in our minds. Like we just can't seem to get out, and no matter where we move around in our physical reality, we move around the house, or you shift locations to a different place in your town, you go to the park or something, those thoughts continue to follow you and haunt you, further creating separation, further exacerbating the overthinking, and further creating more of the problem. One way I've shifted out of that is to remind myself, rather, that we are consciousness, us. Like we are all swimming in a sea of oneness consciousness, as I like to put it. That in this universe, it is highly collaborative in the non-physical and physical, more than we even realize. There is such thing as oneness consciousness. And if you're new to this, I really highly encourage you to tap into it through meditation and mindfulness, because it's the one thing that gets me out of the feeling of isolation. I work remotely, and I have worked remotely in my career, my trade job, if you will, as a brand designer, for the past 10 years. So that's a long time. I've gotten used to that environment, but it does come with some of those drawbacks that you can start to feel alone in a vacuum. And especially when I go days on end, even just doing task work or production work, that isn't necessarily, it's just like, you got to get it done, it's grunt work. It's not necessarily like sets my soul on fire, but you just got to do it. That shifts me into a lower vibration for sure. And I can just start to lose touch of that oneness consciousness. I can start to feel like, who even cares what I'm doing? Who even knows what I'm even doing? And why do they care? And I can start to doubt myself and wonder if any of this even matters. You know what I mean? And maybe you felt that same way. Maybe you've questioned whether you're needed, whether anyone wants the skills and talents that you have to offer. The answer is an absolute capital Y-E-S, yes, Y-E-S, yes. So just a quick sidebar about consciousness. And I just put universe here because in one lens, they are the same. It is highly collaborative, as I mentioned. If you are new to channeling, or you're intuitive, you can pick up on your guides. You can maybe you have the ability to communicate with the other side. Then you know that this is a very highly collaborative universe. And even there's so much that goes on in the unseen that we are not always privy to. But the more I've engaged with the other side and the ethers and whatnot, the more I've come to realize that this is such a collaborative universe. And there are so many beings, wonderful, benevolent light beings. So maybe even some in your spirit team of people in your life that have passed on that are always looking after you. Okay, so it's a reminder that you are so loved, that you are so guided, supported. And yes, of course, in this physical world, you are needed. Your light is needed. If you ever question it, when you're getting into those tunneling thoughts, because the ego and the mind are going to start to create that separation if they're left unchecked, bring yourself back to oneness consciousness, to the usness. One other way I like to look at this is how like my dreams are woven with your dreams. All of our dreams are interconnected. Why? How do I know this? Because if you look at it from a philosophical lens, purely from the eyes of, or from the lens of manifestation, law of attraction, it's like, yes, my soul had these aspirations and wanted to accomplish certain things when I came into this physical presence, but we dictate, we create what that looks like in the more day-to-day, in how it shows up in the physical. Even though I'm creative and I love to share higher wisdom, and that has helped me throughout my experience, throughout my journey, the how or the medium or the way in which I share it, it has all been like dictated by what I've responded to in my environment. So therefore, what I'm trying to get at, hopefully the meaning wasn't lost by now, is that our dreams are interwoven by the demand and need from others. Even if we just sense it on a soul level, it's there and we know it. We have a deep knowing of it. Some of the wonderful teachers and thought leaders in the spiritual space were so pertinent to my healing journey and my spiritual awakening as I was going through it years ago. Had they not stepped forward and shared their messages, that I would have never received the help, right? So just know that whatever talents and gifts that you have, it is absolutely needed in this world. You wouldn't have those if they weren't needed. And you can just trust that your soul is always guiding you in the right direction, that through this oneness connection, this fabric of life, you hold your patch in that big, grand, vast tapestry that is interconnected and woven in with others. I hope that concept lands. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. It's kind of a big thing to try to articulate in words, but just know that our dreams are interwoven with each other. Like the more I share my messages, the more I share my starseed shop and my clothes and my apparel line, the more people are like, whoa, like this is what I've been asking for. This is what I've been calling in. Has that ever happened to you? This one time I was taking a dance series, and as it wrapped up, I asked my dance teacher, okay, what's the next thing we're going to do? And synchronistically, she had mentioned, oh, I think we should do something with Aaliyah from the 90s. And I was like, oh my God, that was literally going to be my specific next request. Yet we never spoke about it prior to that. There were never even any leads that went in that direction. Like, hey, maybe we should do a 90s series. Nothing like that. We both co-created that idea, that thought form, that dream in the ethers. So we could share that experience. And lo and behold, it was one of the most popular dance series of her classes that I've gone to, that I was able to see. It was just amazing and it felt like such a gift to be part of that collective of dancers that got to do a couple dances to a couple of Aaliyah's awesome songs. It was amazing. So that's just a testimony of how our dreams are interwoven. Even if it mostly exists on the non-physical or the pre-manifest, as I like to say sometimes, know that we're connected in this cosmic oneness soup and that you are so loved and needed. I promise you. Even if the mind and the ego pull you out of that and create this massive grand illusion that you are separate, or that you may not be needed, you are. I'm just getting a little misty-eyed saying that. Okay, so now that we've covered, how the oneness consciousness really works, how do you tap into it? What is this oneness consciousness? Well, one way I tap into it is through my mindfulness practices in the morning. I'm going to be sharing what those practices are in the next couple of months, so be sure to be subscribing to my channel so that you can get those as they release, because they're really good. Not to toot my own horn, but they will get you there. And they'll kind of help you tap into that aspect more. But number one, just set the intention that you want to connect to it. If you've never connected in or have experienced that oneness consciousness feeling, then first of all, set the intention that you want to and believe that you will. Don't cockblock yourself by thinking that you won't, because if you think you won't, then you're going to kind of self-sabotage. Set the intention and believe that you will. So through mindfulness, you can get there. The second one is through meditation, a guided meditation that will guide you into that oneness consciousness, to tapping into it. A third way is through heart connection, through dropping into your heart and feeling into that expansiveness. That's another way of getting out of the mind and the ego and shifting into that awareness of the oneness consciousness. That's another gateway or portal to access it. If you don't know how to connect in with your heart, you want some guidance and tips, I do have a guide linked in the description box below. It's free. You can grab it to download. The second page is wall art with the affirmation on it. It's really beautiful. I designed it. I hope you like it. So grab that. That way you can paste up your wall art and have that in your space as you practice your mindfulness. And it gives you the 3 tips on how to connect in with your heart. So those are the 3 ways that you can connect in with that oneness consciousness. I know every single time when I have my tunneling thoughts going on and I run through my mindfulness, basically kicking out the ego and the mind, putting them in their place. And when I tune back into how I am part of the fabric of the universe and that I am, in this sea of oneness consciousness, it's like it alleviates all this pressure. And I'm like, oh, I'm happy again. I'm free again. I reclaim the freedom and the sovereignty from feeling so isolated, feeling so lost in my own, my own siloed experience. We were never meant to walk this journey alone. We were never meant to feel so isolated. That's why we as humans are wired for connection, because it's supposed to be a symbiotic experience. Okay. I hope that makes a lot of sense. Consciousness, tap back into the usness, the oneness, and know that you are never alone, my friend. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love.